you all, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to the No-Till Market Garden Podcast, episode 16, season 2. Got a great episode of the podcast for you today with Shanon and Michael of Hillview Farms. Well, Shannon's with us for a few minutes at least. That'll make sense shortly. Hillview is a really cool farm, and we've been following them for a while. I'm excited to get them on. They were actually one of the farms whose power was shut off in California by the power companies to avoid fires this past summer. And we talk about that. We talk about their growing systems and how and why they've sort of moved away from a deep compost mulch system a bit, and so much more. Before we get going, we have a couple sponsors today, starting with Dr. Elaine Ingham's Soil Food Web.
Hi everyone, this is Keisha from the Soil Food Web School. I just wanted to tell you all about the brand new courses that Dr. Elaine Ingham is just about to launch. As you may know, Dr. Ingham is considered by many to be the world's foremost soil biologist. She's spent the last 4 decades pioneering research on how plants and microbes work together. Dr. Ingham has helped farmers around the world to reduce their chemical inputs and to simultaneously increase their yields and profits. I've personally trained with Dr. Ingham and now run a successful business helping farmers to grow food in harmony with nature. The all-new Soil Food Web Foundation courses are being launched this Christmas with a special introductory offer of $1,600 off for the first 150 students. If you would like to join the soil revolution, then please go to www.soilfoodweb.com today.
Today's show is also generously supported by BCS America.
You already know about the legendary versatility of BCS two-wheel tractors on the small farm. You know it's the most economical and time-saving choice for market farmers, building beds with the rotary plow, mixing amendments with the power harrow, and mowing cover crops with the flail mower. But a BCS two-wheel tractor can do much more beyond the small farm. BCS powers more than 40 high-quality PTO-driven attachments, each with the power and performance of an all-gear drive transmission. Blow snow with BCS's snow thrower, also known as the snow cannon. Chip and shred debris with the chipper shredder. Clean your property with the pressure washer. Irrigate your lawn or garden with the high-pressure irrigation pump. Haul over 800 pounds, including yourself, with a rideable utility trailer. And now, spread compost evenly over 30-inch beds with the all-new spreader attachment. Yep, BCS is pretty much the Swiss Army knife of power equipment. Check out bcsamerica.com for the latest attachments, videos, promotions, and more. That's bcsamerica.com.
Big thank you to our show sponsors. And that's enough for me. Let's get to our awesome interview with Michael and Shanon of Hillview Farms. Michael and Shanon Wallman, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Hey, good to be here.
And it's great to have you. Maybe we could just start where we usually start with this podcast. Could you tell us a little bit about where you are, how much land you're working with, and those sorts of things?
So we have it's about 2 acres of cultivated land, and we are in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas. We're actually right in between the town of Lincoln and Auburn. We started farming about 8 years ago, and we actually started on more of an urban farm setting, it was in a residential area, more in Auburn. And we started there basically just small scale market style farming. We started with just a really simple farm stand. And then since then we grew and we got a little bit bigger. And then eventually we invested in this property where we are now. And that was just about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So this property is fairly new to us. But yeah, we love farming here. It's a lot of fun. We do mostly farmers markets, some wholesale, and some retail accounts.
Yeah. And we've been certified organic since the start.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
Okay, so talk a little bit about those markets and things. You're doing how many markets did you say?
So
you were
it
doing?
does change seasonally, but we are mostly direct sales. So as of right now, we're doing 2 year-round farmers markets, which is really great for us. We do a seasonal. It's kind of our version of a farm stand because we did start out as a farm stand based operation. It has changed since we started. right now it's kind of like it's a farm stand meets CSA. It's basically like a pre-order CSA box pickup that we do June to October. That's been really fun. And that, yeah, so we do the online farm stand, 2 farmers markets. We have a really big wholesale account, which is actually a food hub. So a majority of our stuff actually ends up in the Tahoe area. We work with about like 45 restaurants in the Tahoe area, and the food hub does all that distribution for us, which is a really great account.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a handful of restaurants that we love working with in the Auburn area, and some little small grocery store kind of things.
Mm-hmm. And we're kind of branching out and doing a little more co-ops.
Yeah.
So there's 2 really great co-ops, almost same distance between our farms, and that can be a better sales outlet if we want to pursue it.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we're working with just one of them and really meeting seasonal needs in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
Since we are a year-round farm, we do 4 seasons, and we're just trying to fill the gap when some other local farms that are a little bit higher up in the mountains, say around in between 12 and 3,000 elevation, they can't supply the co-op with local needs. We'll kind of step in and provide some of the needs they want. And it's, we've done all kinds of stuff. We've had a farm stand on the farm. We've done 5 farmers markets a week.
Yeah.
Doubling up days with just 2 of us, and then my parents coming and helping out on Saturdays and doing their own markets. And the first couple of years, it was just like trying to get enough cash flow just to make it. And now we're in a good spot. It feels like we're in a good spot.
We're a little bit more managed, and we're trying to work harder at filling less accounts than just spreading ourselves thin and burning ourselves out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I kind of describe it as, relationships. When you first start off, you're dating.
Yeah.
And you're just trying to feel it out, who you're working with. Our chef's going to be around for a while. Do they like the style of produce that we're growing or communication? And now we're getting into our 8th, 9th year, and we really just want to be married. I'm tired of dating. I don't want to go out there and find more accounts.
It's hard. And it's hard, especially, it's hard trying to be consistent with accounts when farming is not consistent, and you have to work with people who understand those inconsistencies and are willing to work with you just as much as you're willing to work with them. It's a mutual relationship.
Yeah. So we're I like where our accounts are, and we have such a good farmers market in Auburn.
We do. We're really spoiled the Auburn is one of the oldest farmers markets in Northern California, and it's just the community based around that market is just amazing.
Jesse, can we take a little break?
Oh, somebody came in.
All right. What's up, Albert? CCOF is here. CCOF is here.
What?
And Garrett. And Garrett?
Okay. We have our organic certifier just stopped by for a...
Oh, your auditor. So your organic certifier.
I don't know. One of our employees just popped his head in and said CCOF is here for a little visit.
Oh, that's fun. Okay. So, yeah, that happened. For those who don't know, when you're certified, it is in the agreement that the certifier can surprise you at any point for an audit, like in the middle of a podcast. But I was able to get Michael back for the next week. Shanon couldn't join us, unfortunately. They were super busy last month. But Michael gave us another hour, and super grateful for that because we get into a lot of really cool stuff here. So here's Michael. Michael, welcome back. That was it's been a few days now, and Shannon's not with us. She's off working, but before you had your audit, we were talking about a little bit about your marketing strategy, and was kind of hoping, Michael, that you could fill us in a little bit more on that online farm stand and how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. So the online farm stand is definitely Shannon's brainchild. And really, it's just taking bits and pieces that we've been doing over the years and trying to combine them to kind of see if it's another avenue of sales that we want to achieve. when we were doing our marketing plan, we kind of look at like the three legs of marketing. You have convenience, price, and quality. And it's hard to do all three. And so what we try to shoot for is we try to have good quality at a reasonable price. So not, overshooting the market, not undershooting it, just like a fair value for what our product's worth. The hardest part on a small scale farm for us is convenience. Especially in California, we have some amazing farms. They're able to get product to you really quickly, and it's a pretty high quality product. So the online farm stand was something that came up because when we first started our farm, we actually had a farm stand on our original property, and we had an urban farm in town, and people would come and get to see the farm, get to pick up vegetables, and then we slowly went away from that because we no longer farm in that urban setting, and we got our forever farm more out in the country, so we didn't have that farm stand. At the same time, we still wanted that connection. There's something, the farmers market was getting a little too busy. So we couldn't sit, we have lines now that come in, and we still wanted that direct connection without doing a full CSA. We were nervous about doing a CSA because it didn't fit into our system. Also, starting off from talking to other farmers, we didn't really want to do it because of the pressure. Mostly, I think, ones if we had failed crops and we're just learning and things like that. So now going into this 8th season farming, we kind of took a hybrid of both. So we call it an online farm stand. It's mostly like an online CSA program, but we didn't want to lead with the CSA because when we talked to our consumers, they didn't actually know exactly what a CSA was. Also, too, with so many box programs that are now available, we kind of felt like the marketing scheme with true CSAs was taken away when all these big box programs started up. So we wanted to try to distance ourselves from those like Farm Fresh to You and things like that. We created an online farm stand. It went pretty well. The biggest thing that we wanted to do for our customers was have convenience. So they have, there's no like sign up fees or anything like that. You just go on and get to look. You can buy like a CSA share or like a farm, I think we call it like, what's fresh this week. And then we also do lots of bulk. So that's kind of the main thing we wanted to pass on to consumers was you have the option of buying like bulk tomatoes or bulk lettuce, or if you're having a party, and have those prices be very similar to what we're selling to restaurant accounts. And they could pass on that savings. We had some customers, buying $100 worth of stuff each week. So our marketing scheme is really not scheme. That's kind of like that's our marketing. What we're trying to achieve is we're trying to have really maybe less customers, but higher quality customers. And the online store was a great avenue for that, so that the customers that really want to support us can get bigger deals on some of our bulk items.
Okay, and then what does the sort of distribution of that look like? And how are you managing that on a technical level, like packing boxes and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so we had it, we would send it out. It'd be like a normal CSA. I think they had to order by Tuesday night, and then Wednesday we would pack it and then go to a local brewery. We just set up and they'd come get their products, and we'd sit down and like have a beer or dinner, and gave people the options of communicating with us. So that was kind of the logistics behind it. We kind of capped it. We didn't want to do more than 30 like boxes. That's the CSA boxes. We could do way more like bulk tomatoes and things like that. The sky was kind of the limit for whatever people wanted to order. And then software wise, we looked out to Local Line. That it just didn't seem like the perfect fit. They had really good customer service. It just didn't work out. And then we just did, Shannon just set it up through our our website, which is hosted by Wix, and we just paid for the addition to have an add-on store. And it's for the scale that we're going, it was very easy to do. Not too much complications as far as I know. I know she took on the bulk of that, but never heard her complaining about it, so that's probably good.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I love that idea of, I think it's interesting, the idea of sort of backing, kind of separating yourself, distancing yourself from the CSA idea, but still sort of offering the same thing that, and it definitely works in the farmer's favor. But you said these are kind of week to week, right? Like the sales aren't, somebody's not buying a year's worth of the farm stand, right?
Correct. So, and then to capture the sales for that, we offer a Farmly card. And so it's a prepaid debit card that you buy early on in the season. And then we have, depending on like how much you purchase on that card, there's added value. Say you buy like $100, you get, a certain amount of percentage added on. We'll say 10%. So you get $110 worth of vegetables. What that does is it kind of creates, it creates, they've already paid for it, but they don't have to, they can go on vacation or do whatever they want, and they can use that on our store. So they can use that, and it's a pretty good deal because now you're getting wholesale prices along with, for supporting us in the beginning, you're another added value.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you're kind of operating under a sort of deconstructed CSA, and I love the farm card, the Farmly card. That's something that's been coming up more and more in conversations that I've been having, and something that Hannah and I, my wife, we're actually exploring this year is kind of a little bit moving away from the CSA and seeing if that farm card can't help us early on with that boost. Has that kind of been what you've seen, is that it's given you that kind of stepped in where the CSA might for other farms?
Yeah, I mean, these are kind of, we picked this idea up from another local farmer, and, so they had multiple years of trialing it, and we just kind of copied a similar thing, but people love it, and if you're able to use them at farmers markets, it's another good outlet because they've already pre-purchased a debit card, not necessarily product. So you're not taking away from, other vendors per se. They still have the option of buying wherever they want at the farmer's market, but they do kind of have that trusted investment to go to your stall and look to see what you have that week. And it just gives you more of anytime you create connection between you and the people that you're growing for, and it's just a great way to bond. And we picked up that name Farmly. I think there's a farmer, I saw it online, and we took that idea from someone else too, and it's just so cute and people love it, so we call it the Farmly card.
Yeah, that's great. I do you have any tips in terms of marketing that? Like, are you selling these a lot just at the farmer's market, or are you able to push a little bit of these, sell some of these online? How does that work?
Yeah, so mostly what we did, one of the first marketings that we really want to come up with to be able to connect to people is we started an email list. And so we have a pretty extensive emailing thing we send out every week during the main season. We try not to bombard people with emails, and we tell them if you don't want email, don't sign up for this because you will hear from us. But yeah, so the email list is usually what we use. We don't put a lot of pressure and extra marketing at the farmer's market or the farm stand because we feel like the goal is to do this for the next 30 years. We really want people that value the card just from our email blasts or a couple of newsletter, and just present it to them in a very open way if this is something they want to do. And then so not too much marketing to get people to buy it besides email and just talking to them directly. But it seems every year it seems to get more and more people signing up for it. The biggest thing we didn't want to happen was these people get these prepaid debit cards and then they never use them, or they keep on rolling over and over and over, just because they moved or did something else. So we wanted it to be very clear that you can have this card for, I think we're kind of setting it maybe at 2 years, but after that, this is it. Like we can't just hold this forever, because if it does get bigger, once someone's got a lot of money racked up, and then it takes away from our cash flow sales, because a lot of that time that money's already spent. And so we didn't want like a big thing at the end of the year, like all of a sudden everyone rushes and spends their cards.
Right. Yeah. I guess it could be a big concern, especially when you have a lot of high ticket items, and then everybody, 10 of those people come with $200 cards and get all the tomatoes or the cherry tomatoes or whatever it may be.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, we're really trying to focus on that convenience factor, and then relationship building, because that's really what small market scale farming is building relationships with your customers. So all ideas that we have are really like, what does the customer want? And then we try to fill that need. But convenience is very tough. I had an Amazon order the other day, and it took like 4 days. I was like, what the heck? Why is it taking so long? So even I'm in the, wanting things now and fast. So that's a tough thing. We're looking at how do we stay a viable business through generations. Most of our clientele's older. So, how do we capture younger people that have fast-paced lifestyles with kids and things like that they can still, buy locally?
Yeah, that's a big question. That's an interesting. Now that you've said that, that's something that I've noticed too, is that a lot of our clientele are older. That's not something I'd really thought about. Is that something? Have you kind of designed a strategy to bring in some of the younger generation to start building relationships with those as well?
Yeah, I think this is kind of our intro to it, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
With the online marketing. So the online farm store, and we'll kind of see where it pieces together from there. And it was just, it wasn't a huge part of our sales, to be honest with you, but it was very engaging to try something new in the marketing aspect and see. And we had really good people that wanted it back. They were like, hey, we want to do this again next year. This was a lot of fun. So the biggest thing with convenience and getting to know those younger clientele is, giving them options throughout the week, because they're fast paced. It's tough. I can see it's tough for them if you got kids and both parents are working. Culturally, it's hard to make that time for healthy eating and healthy lifestyle through small vendors like a farmer's market. And it could just be too that, as people retire, they're just going to start coming to the farmer's market more. So it may not even be a thing we need to worry about. But I just, you just want to always try just to kind of see you just never know what will happen. And I don't know, I was really excited, and I thought Shanon did a phenomenal job. So I was pretty stoked about it.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate how, looking that far down the road, and I think oftentimes we slip into this idea that the farm is just what we're doing right now and forget to sort of think about it in terms of having it go on for 10 or 20 years. Yeah, it's great to think of that.
Yeah, well, we're just trying to make money. Really, sometimes you're like, man, what the heck? How do I make this work? It's, this farming as a business has got to be one of the toughest dang businesses there is. It is difficult.
Yeah, I completely agree. Speaking of difficult, I think we should change subjects here, because I'm really interested in something we spoke about last week before we started recording. You all were in the group of people who had to have mandatory shutoffs on your electricity. Can you talk a little bit about what happened and then how you all dealt with that?
Yeah, so it was so October last month, I believe it was October 9th, we got it was almost for us, it was about a 24-hour notice to have our power shut off. Now, why it was happening was, I don't know if everyone's familiar with our local utility. I think they do a big part of California, which is PG&E. They filed for bankruptcy sometime in 2019, this year. Their main concern was that they started the Paradise fire and a couple other California fires. So they're in court, they're paying a lot of money out, and so they're looking at a zero risk when it comes to any type of equipment that could start wildfires. Now we're in the Northern California region, so we've been going through long periods of drought, and then we got really heavy rains, and then kind of like drought-like conditions again a little bit, but that creates for a lot of foliage and, fuel basically for these fires to take off and get going. And we're talking massive amount of areas. So as the scope of the problem, there's a lot of big things. For us personally, the farmers during this power shutoff they were looking at high winds, very dry conditions that were the same conditions during the Paradise Fire and other fires. So they looked at a zero risk and said basically, hey, we're shutting the power off, and they gave very little notice. And the power is off for about 4 days, I think, for us. And then, so that's the overall the overall start of it, kind of like background. Now, what this did, it just really, it smacked us pretty hard. We set up a risk management for a lot of things that we do on the farm. Our first risk was, when we started off, was land access. The next one was water access. We didn't really have anything for power, when power gets shut off for long periods of time. So we did go through most of October. I think we had about 10 days or so after the 9th that we had power. And the biggest part about it was we were able to get generators going to keep the nursery alive. So when you cut off power, I mean, you have nothing. I mean, you can't wash. It was a food safety concerns. It was kind of a food safety nightmare, to be honest with you. No hot water, no running water. How do you get products clean? How do you clean your tools? How do you clean your work surfaces? How do you keep your crops alive? Everything we do is off of pumps. Keep the nursery alive. We're looking at 80 to 90 degree temperatures with really windy conditions. So the field was drying out really fast. It's still October. We're getting ready to do a huge push for a wintertime production. So those were the thoughts going through our mind. And I'm kind of just rambling here because it's so fresh and kind of just like, what the heck just happened? We were so stressed out. And then in the middle of that, me and Shanon actually were gone for 14 days. We were gone for a wedding and went to Mexico for our first time ever leaving the farm for that long. And we left it in our employees' hands, and man, they did a phenomenal job, but they were stressed out. So along with that, we had food safety concerns, trying to get the propagation water going. We have a well, it's very low. We get most of our water from open ditches that funnel down to Central Valley. Now they cut off water because they had no power. And so we pretty much ran the farm for the month of October with very, very little water, just to water the nursery. And we could run, I think, 6 times through the day. We could do one line of 100, like we do the little wobblers. So one line at 100 feet that covers 6 beds for us. We could do that 6 times a day. So that was pretty much it. So that was the farm itself. The real thing that we didn't think about that hurt us the most was that we're hyper local when we go to our sales, is that everyone we sold to didn't have power. So we had hardly any accounts that needed food. So we were sitting on quite a bit of lettuce. I think for the month of October, we mowed in or tossed about 600 pounds of lettuce mix, just because we weren't set up to reach out to further accounts and get that ball rolling. And then we restarted and mowed in a lot of anything that was direct seeded. Like we had some carrots. Carrots are difficult to get germinated anyways. And then you take away water. I mean, those aren't going to work. So yeah, there's just a lot of problems that kind of came of it. And we're still in limbo. They say this could be the norm for the next 12 years. So we haven't figured this out yet.
Yeah, I guess that was my next question is what do you do to prepare for that?
Yeah, I mean, we're setting up accounts a little bit farther away. And I think when we talked about the marketing, we're tired of reaching for new quality accounts, but this is something we might have to do just to kind of, when this happens, I think there was like the first power shut off, there's close to, 500,000 people that didn't have power. And most of those people were all of our customers. So I don't have any clear answers. We have ideas, that we're going to look for, and it's very similar to farming. You come up with ideas, you got a plan, you go to execute the plan, and then you change it because that's part of farming because it doesn't seem to work out exactly the way you want it every time. But really, what this has taught us is that, and the reason why we're all thinking about these things is because of, climate awareness, climate resilience, climate change, all these things. And we had some fields in the month of October that we didn't water at all. And so most of our brassicas didn't get any water just because we were making sure that we kept some of our core crops, like our direct seeded arugula and mustard greens and lettuce mix, watered. And there just wasn't enough to water some of those kind of longer season crops, and they held up well. We have some plots. We started this farm that we have now 3 years ago, and we started off as a no-till operation on some of our fields, and those were the most climate resistant, drought tolerant, basically areas of the farm that did really, really well. And it's probably just from increasing organic matter over time to have that higher water retention in the soil, kind of like that backup reserve, that the plants were able to dig deep, the roots were able to go further down and kind of get that water. That's kind of that's what I'm thinking. It's hard to know exactly.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So maybe so when you say that you started those fields off no-till, what was that sort of process like? How did you go about that?
Yeah, so I'll kind of give you a little background of how we got into no-till, and then kind of work from there. But do like the Cliff Note version. When we first started out farming, we had this urban farm landscape. And I got Elliot Coleman's book, The New Organic Grower, and that was kind of like our Bible at the time. So we read it. Okay, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna be a market garden. We're gonna do this. We planted a cover crop. We tilled, we planted, and we just had really bad soil at that urban farm setting. I think we were dealing with like a class 7 soil. And I didn't even know the classes went out that far, but basically it wasn't good for vegetable production. It wasn't good for even running pasture on it, animals. It was basically, there was no topsoil. It was just like, I think they call it shite rock. I just call it shite rock. And then we were just like, okay, what do we do? So we looked online, how do you get better soil? And, Googled it. And we came across tillage is bad for the soil. So we're like, okay, well, how do you farm without tilling? So you research, okay, no-till farming, Google. I think there was one YouTube video up at the time. And so it's like, okay, well, there was just no information. I don't know if you came across the same thing, Jesse, when you started, but there wasn't that much information out there on no-till farming on a commercial scale.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the entire genesis of this podcast was we need some information out there about how to do it.
Yeah, so it was just like, okay, we'll put it on the back burner. On that same year, we went to a farm conference in Fresno, the Small Farm Conference, and we went to small farms in California, and I think the smallest farm we visited was 100 acres. And I remember asking the farmers there, I was like, "Have you guys ever heard of no-till?" And it was just like, "What are you talking about, you dreamer? Like, get out of here. This is not possible." No one, people just looked at me weird. I was like, okay, the next year, I went to the small farm conference again. This time I was excited because they had a tour set up with these farmers out of Sebastopol, California called Singing Frogs Farm. And I'm sure everyone on this podcast has heard of the Kaisers. And I remember when we showed up, it was such a fantastic day. And we went to a farm right before, this was in March. And they had it was a community, I believe it was a community college in the area, and they just mowed in their cover crop and tilled in their cover crop, and they had all this bare soil. They were so excited about some of their cover crop flowering and these beneficial, these bees and everything in there, and diversity, and and it was wonderful. I was like, this is really great, this is wonderful. And then an hour later, we take this long drive in this huge bus down to this farm at the bottom of this hill that's surrounded by big wineries, and it was like the garden, of Eden. It was just the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen. The diversity, the plants, how much food they were growing. This is kind of like, to have that much product in the ground in March and be selling. I was like, this is a way that we could actually make a living. And that was one of the things we were looking for too, is we were trying to find people that were around 3 acres that have been doing this more than 6 years, because it's, the profit margins are really tight. And then you get off the bus and you're just like, what's going on? And then all of a sudden you meet the Kaisers, and then they're just, the way they speak and the way they talk, you just like, yeah, of course, let's do this. So after that, I actually took the entire family, and I think I went to their farm almost 3 or 4 times that year. And, I think the next weekend they're having another tour. I grabbed my wife, Shanon, my parents, my brothers, anybody that was like looking at me or me and my wife, Shanon, saying like, you guys are doing what? You're doing a farm? Like, is that even a thing? Like, are you going to make money? Are you going to be able to live life? Like, what are you guys doing? And so I took them there. I was like, look, everyone's doing this. This is great. And it was such a great thing. So that was kind of the background. And the next year, we actually took our urban farm and we split it in half. We did half no-till and half regular tractors with some tillage and things like that. And the soil changed so rapidly. It was just unbelievable. The no-till plots, because we couldn't really get into the soil. The plots we did till, the tiller was basically bouncing off of the soil because it was so much rock. And so the idea was we couldn't really create fertility within the soil and drive in those cover crops. Let's grow on top and create soil on top. And eventually, all that biology will bring and transform our native soil. And so that it was amazing to see how fast that transformed. So when we got our new farm, we set that new plot up, and we're doing both farms at the same time. And they're about 30 minutes away from each other. And we set it up very similar to how Singing Frogs sets up their farm. So what we did was we just we had it in cover crop when we first got the farm. We mowed it, we put the silage tarps on, and then heavy compost. I mean, it's so fun like hearing these terms. I just saw you guys. Someone came up with a term like deep mulching system. That wasn't even a thing. I didn't even know that was the term for what we were doing. But is that right? Deep mulching system.
Yeah, that's what I don't know. I don't know if we came up with that or if somebody else did, but it seemed like the organic that seems to be the expression now is deep compost mulch. Yeah.
Yeah, deep compost mulch system. So that, it's fun that there's like terms for what the heck, these we're doing. It's you're like, how do you describe? Well, I just throw compost on top and things like that. So that's how we set up a portion of our new farm. Yeah, and that's how we got going here on this property.
Hey, you all, just jumping in here to say that the videos that we've been giving to our Patreon members as bonus material are starting to go up on our YouTube page. We put one up this week with 10 Mothers Farm and another one with Faithful Farms. You can go check those out at YouTube at No Till Growers. Originally, we were giving that content, like I said, as bonus material to the patrons, but that just never really felt right for us. We don't really like the paywall thing. We're happy to give our patrons discounts and that sort of stuff, but we didn't want to keep no-till information out of reach of anyone. But with all of that said, we really can't do this podcast and all the stuff that we do, the videos, etc., without the Patreon page. So if getting that information out there is something that you would like to support, please consider signing up at patreon.com/farmerjesse, where you do get discounts on merch, like I said, and things like events like the one that we're having in San Diego this upcoming February. And at certain levels, you also get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs this week to Dawson Mahalko, J.M. Fortier, Jeffrey Hayes, Kevin Keene, Ryan Gosser, Weaver Akers, Yannick LaPlante, and Terry Barr. Thank you so much for your support. Back to Michael.
Yeah, that's great. So, before we started talking last week, you said that you kind of did that for a while, but that you've also started using the power harrow. Can you talk about your sort of experience with no-till that way and then how that's changed?
Yeah, I think last year or beginning of this year, we finally moved all the way out to this property. This is our 10-acre parcel, more in the rural county. And so we weren't in that urban setting anymore, mostly because the place that we were selling at was my parents' property and they sold the house. So we were like, okay, so we kind of set up, to go here. When we had the option and when we're setting up the farm, there's a couple things that were happening that were I was like, okay, I don't know if this is right. So we knew we just got a new parcel. Now, the biggest thing that happened was that our overhead skyrocketed. We were doing urban farming, keeping expenses really low. We lived in a trailer for a couple of years just to throw all the money into the farm. And now we have a big mortgage. And so we knew we wanted to transform the farm and we needed to get a little bit bigger. And the couple things that I was very nervous about when I was getting bigger from the size scale that we're probably at 1/2 acre to 3/4 acre of a no-till urban farm. And now we're looking to get to about 1 acre to 1.5 acres. But it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's, with how much you produce off of that small amount of space is a lot. So a couple things we wanted to change is that I no longer wanted to cut all crop residue out and bring it to the compost pile. And the reason for that was my body was just starting to feel the effects of removing that much material by hand. Because when we set up the new farm, or if you're doing a no-till or anything, I think the first step is to have permanent beds. And then you no longer really bring the tractor into the beds. I used to bring the tractor in when I was just farming by myself. My bed was basically the undercarriage of the tractor. And then I'd have the bucket and I just would, I would pull as I drive over. I just use a shovel and just throw the compost out and then plant. But I didn't want to do that. And I didn't want to bring the tractor in because when we set up this permanent bed farm, our soil is a heavy clay. And some of the biggest things that are hard for no-till is compaction. And if you do create compaction, how do you get that soil loosened up again if you're not disturbing it? So that was one of the big things that we wanted to change was, our bodies. Also, the next thing is like, okay, so we have bigger overhead. Well, we got to sell more. Well, I need more people. And so another big thing that was happening was this was our first year of really kind of bringing on a crew. We had, and I wasn't comfortable enough being able to eloquently explain and work a no-till system with a bigger crew. One of the advantages of the no-till, the way that Kaiser set it up, it is so fast paced. So one crop in, one crop out, you just boom, boom, boom. It's just nonstop. It's really relentless. And so I don't think I had the language yet to be able to run a crew successfully the same way that Kaiser's did it, because they are just masterful communicators. And so that was something that I knew was something I wanted to work on going forward. So we introduced the BCS was this year. I was really intrigued to get the BCS because of that flail mower. That was the real reason why we got the BCS. We tried so many different things on how to remove crop residue. I used lawn mowers, I used push mowers, I used weed whackers. It just, everything worked well, but nothing works as well as that BCS flame mower, especially if you're growing cut greens next to a broccoli patch. Any other thing, you just get so much debris shooting over into your other beds, and we just needed it cleaner. You don't want to weed through the stuff that you just mowed in. So that was a big game changer. Along with that, we decided to get the Power Harrow. Mostly we wanted the Power Harrow to open up new plots. So since we closed down the old farm, transitioned everything to this farm, we only had, I think, 30 beds in production, and our beds are 48 on center, 100 feet long. We increased that to almost 78 beds. And so we wanted to be able to easily set up a farm on a permanent bed system. Also, our farm has no flat ground. It's all on hills. So a lot of tiering involved. And so we slowly are transitioning the farm using the Power Harrow to set really precise beds up. So we do have spots on the farm that are in, I guess you would say, that deep compost mulch. We might run the tilther over it. I don't know how people feel about tilther and no-till, but we kind of went away from labeling ourselves as directly just a no-till farm, because I felt like it boxed us in too much for what we wanted to achieve going further. I think the idea is, especially with this kind of explaining about PG&E and power being shut off, is what we're trying to do is we're trying to create this small farm to be as climate resilient as possible when these catastrophic incidents happen. Or it may not even be that. It's like it goes from hot to cold so fast. There's so much going on that what we're really looking for, I think someone used this term, is how do we create living soil? And so if you are a farmer and you're looking to get away from tillage, that Power Harrow, I think, is a great tool to start you on that track, especially if you need to open up beds, or I don't know. What are your thoughts, Jesse? Does that make sense, everything I was saying?
No, that's great. And in terms of like the whether or not the tilter and all these things, I always encourage guests to not worry too much about that, because it is about living soil. It is about what you're doing to make your soil as healthy as possible. It's about the ecology and those sorts of things. And in my mind, that's always the goal, is trying to maximize your photosynthesis and maximize your ecology. And sometimes you have to use different tools to achieve that. But one thing I want to know in terms of that power harrow, you said you're using it to open up new beds. What does that look like? Like I can imagine that, I guess, with a tiller. Are you just, can you kind of describe what you mean by that?
Yeah, so we're slowly, it's all changing. We got different plots, go different ways. The main idea from our old urban farm was that we wanted to create soil on top of our natural soil that we were getting, because it wasn't a very good quality soil. So that deep compost mulch system fit that really well. Let's build on top. Now we have a farm that does have topsoil, even though it is a heavy clay, that stays in place really well. We wanted to really try to build our healthy soil as far down as we could get, and then slowly build up and create, so that we didn't have to deal with compaction issues in the future. So some of the plots that we used is we actually had a cover crop, very traditional, mowed it, used the power harrow, after it dried out. It's very different from a tiller. You really can't do the same thing if you're trying to dispose of crop residue with that power harrow. It just doesn't work the same. So we would cover crop and then mow it, either power harrow it. I think we did that once. It didn't work out, and that's how we found out that doesn't work like a tiller. And then we just throw the tarps on. We leave the tarps on as long as it can be. We have a spot this year on this farm, and one of the reasons why we're slowly transitioning too is we are going very heavy. The big thing we wanted to accomplish this year was get rid of some weeds. We have some really bad perennial weeds with rhizomes. We got Bermuda grass, Johnson grass, and bindweed that are forever weeds if you cannot eradicate them. And a no compost mulching system doesn't do it. You cannot just layer compost on top. At our old farm, we went to that deep compost system. Within a year, there's no weeds in sight. I didn't do any weeding. This farm, totally different. There was an organic farm that had it before us, and they tractor cultivated and moved so many weed seeds around. I mean, I had no idea this is what farmers deal with. I mean, it was just crazy. So we lay down those tarps, and we kind of go through that. The guy at Neversink, Connor Crickmore, he's recommended leaving some of these silage tarps on for a year. So we did that on some of our plots, and we still have bindweed. I mean, it's that bindweed, oh my gosh, but we're trying to eradicate it. But anyways, to get back on track, so we'll cover crop, mow it, put the tarps on. We also had a guy here in the beginning of the season. He's like, hey, we should, if we're going to open these up, let's rip them. And so we did rip quite a few sections of the bed to really get that soil loosened up, and that worked phenomenally. And then and after that you have your choice. You can create with the silage tarps and ripping, you pretty much got a clean slate. Now you get to choose if you want to use a power harrow, tilther, or just go mulch system. And that seems to be based on your weeds, your soil type, and how big your farm is.
Okay, and you're not raising those beds, or you are? They're just kind of flat against the soil, or you're raising those beds that you're using with the power harrow with?
Yeah, so now we're not raising beds anymore. Before, when we first started off, we'd get a raised bed, mostly because our land was in like some kind of valley spot, so we didn't want flooding. Now we're all on hillsides, and so we're actually not necessarily needing to have a raised bed And it does get raised just from adding compost a little bit, but we're actually going away from a raised bed setting, just because it's actually more work to manage. It feels like it's a little bit harder to weed. We're doing a little bit better job at having these permanent bed systems. I'm really not a fan of string. Everyone that I got this, our workers and Shanon, they just know I hate string. We're slowly adopting that string in there just because it sets such a good line. And when you're able to follow that and then create a bed, you don't really need to have that raised up bed top. Sometimes it is kind of nice when I have the other raised, you don't need to put string in. You can kind of see the bed and you just kind of go with that, and it just kind of stays that way. So it's just an adaptation from what our soil is, what we're trying to achieve, and so we're not going for a raised bed anymore. I have done that in the past. When we first started out, I hand dug all my raised beds because I thought that's what you needed. I looked at JM's farm. I was like, oh, that's what you got to do. Now I have more of a idea of what my soil type is like in my climate. So I think that totally depends on your regional area.
Right. And in a drier climate, too, you're probably not going to want them to. Part of the advantage of having raised beds is not just warming up earlier in the spring or something, but it's also that they dry out earlier in the spring. And you all may not want that, I would assume.
Yeah, it's a non thing here.
So another question, I guess, about the sort of, it's interesting that you kind of are going to have both perspectives. So with the section that you're power harrowing, are you also adding a layer of compost over top as a mulch at all? Or is that just you're adding compost, you're kind of working it in with the power harrow, and then you're planting into that?
Yeah. So all beds are treated the same way. So we all, the same amount of compost applied to like a no-till or a tilther bed is the same amount of compost applied to a power harrow bed. So sometimes, and the reason why I like the tilther and power harrow was because of our marketing channels and the products that we were bringing to market. We went when we were doing the Singing Frogs farm model, everything was pretty much transplanted. Now, to increase and save labor is a huge thing. So one, I talked about, not only do I not have the best skills yet on how to manage a team, but also labor cost is increasing. And then finding, like we're trying to pay people around 15, hopefully go up from there. 13 to 16, $17 an hour is kind of like the ballpark where people are getting paid. But eventually, 15 will be the standard, and we really want to get people up to $20 an hour. Now, to do that, I can't have as many people. I think I can have less people, higher quality, and pay them more. So we went from doing all transplanted on a small scale is a lot of labor. So we knew that we wanted to switch more to direct seeding. So, and then we also incorporated more crops that have to do with direct seeding. So when we first trialed out direct seeding on our no-till plots, we had a lot of problems. One, because of the compost and the dryness was creating almost like hydrophobic, and the water would just kind of bead off of it. And that's kind of more of a management problem than a compost problem. You can definitely figure that out. But then when we did figure that out and we had the moisture, we actually couldn't get a good germination because our seed to soil contact wasn't that good. It was mostly just kind of like hanging out in the compost, and it just maybe it was the heat, I don't know, it just wasn't working. And so when we introduced that tilther, and that's like the hopefully everyone knows what a tilther is. That created, I think, what do you think? Do I need to describe what a tilther is?
No, I mean, I think most people probably know it. It's just like a very miniature version of a tiller that's driven by a drill. For those who don't know, unless you want to describe it differently.
No, it's a finishing tool, pretty much. You can't do anything else with that, but it gave us a really good platform to do direct seeding and run the Jang. So that's our main direct seeder that we use, and it started working really, really well. Now that we have the Power Hero is used the same way that Tilther's used. And I love that you can adjust plots. So not only is the Power helping us increase rapidly our farm, but it also creates a really nice flat surface that we can do really good direct seeding. And it's difficult on our property because we have so much slope. So we have all these tiered systems in different directions for water management and runoff, but it's not necessarily the easiest way to farm when you're working with all these slopes. And that Power Harrow gives you a really nice flat surface to work if you're doing any type of direct seeding. I hope one day, eventually, as we keep on creating and making soil and our structure's changing. It's amazing to see the structure change over time between the no-till and the Power Harrow. And I think it'll get there. When we did our other way we were doing it, when we first set up our no-till plot, it changed very rapidly. I can see the changes now because we're also adding less compost than we ever have. One, because our compost quality is not that good. It's more like a woody mulch. But I think it will take us longer to get to the same take us longer to get that structure that we're looking for in our soil that we're able to do no-till again. It's just we're going for the long game. And then also, having to survive in the economics of farming with labor, and our overhead got really high. So we're just trying to figure out, how do I mix my I don't want to say ethical, but my ideological visions of what farming can be with the economics. And a lot of times those two things they create friction with each other. And it's very difficult to have this mecca of both. And it's just, you can get there, but, I think doing these podcasts and getting more information, it just will help more people kind of navigate those issues.
Yeah, that's certainly the hope. And I feel like it doesn't get talked enough about the deep compost mulch system, how difficult seeding can be, especially if you do not have really fine, nice compost. I think if you have nice sifted compost as your compost layer, it can be pretty easy to direct seed into it. But if you have something like what you're describing and what I have, which is kind of this woodier, mulchier stuff, that's what we've been able to get access to in bulk. Direct seeding can be really tough. So having to figure out new and different ways to do that. One question about those plots, do you find with the power harrowing that you're having to do more regular cultivations than you did when you weren't using the power harrow or the tilter?
Yes. And so it's a whole, it's not just the machinery, it's also the way you manage your beds as well. When we were doing the no-till, all those annual weeds are pretty much, they're gone. With the power harrow, we're more aggressive on the soil that first 2 inches or so, and so you do kick up some old weed seeds. These are all new plots that haven't been farmed within almost 8 years, and before that they were heavily farmed. So you have a really big seed bank. There's if we were just going to do the compost mulch, those annual weeds probably wouldn't come up. But the idea is we're very aggressive on our weed management. And if a plot is overtaking weeds, we instantly take it out, and then we'll either start again, we'll compost, or we'll just say, you know what, this is not working. You got so much bindweed or whatever it is, and we'll just tarp it. And then it's just playing that long game that will eventually help us in the future. So we're kind of being very, just we're observing things. These are a whole new area, new farming style. There's just a lot to learn, and having a couple different tools in the toolbox really just kind of helps any type of farmer be able to problem solve and use their best judgment within their soil, marketing, and labor requirements.
That's great. Well, Michael Wallman, thank you so much for your time, and also thank you to Shanon, although she couldn't join us for this latter half.
Yeah, I was happy to do this. This was a lot of fun. Thank you, Jesse. We really appreciate everything you're doing. We know that you're making a lot of sacrifices behind the scenes here, and I think I mentioned it to you. So we're so proud of the culture that you're setting up around no-till. I think it's huge.
All right, if you enjoyed that episode, make sure to follow Hillview Farms on Instagram and all the places. I will load the show notes with some links for them. Also, make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're getting it. Share it with a friend. Don't forget, we will also be in San Diego in February for an event with Jared Smith of Jared's Real Food and Stephen Cornett of Nature's Always Right. Check that out at no-tillgrowers.com. Also, check out the merch that we now have there. Sport your support. That's our new tagline, although I just literally made it up. Anyway, support the show also at patreon.com/farmerjesse and consider signing up. Or if you've just, want to kick us a couple bucks, you really like a show, you really like an episode, you can do that over at Venmo. At No-Till Growers is our handle. People still call them handles? I'm going to call it a handle. Otherwise, thank you all for listening. Thank you to Hannah, my wife, for everything she does to make this happen. We'll see you next week. Bye.
We'll see what happens in the future, but it's very exciting. I think anything we're doing to be more climate resilient is a positive thing.